Hello everyone, and welcome to this training on Pardot User Sync. So all you're seeing at the moment is a tweet or a meme that I created ages and ages ago. So general idea behind this is to simplify the way that you can set up users in Pardot. So just to set the scene, so back in the day when Pardot was a Pardot-only system, it linked with all different CRMs and so on, you could essentially have a Pardot-only user where they only existed in Pardot. That doesn't exist anymore. So this top one, just ignore it. It's not a thing. Hence why we have to use identity licenses. SSO, that refers to really old accounts, really. What you'd be quite hard pressed to find an account that still has this SSO. And just to visualize it, I had to find a screenshot on Google because I didn't know any other accounts that would actually have this. The way it's represented in Pardot is via this blue spanner. So what this means is you've created a user in Pardot, you've created a user in Salesforce, and all you've done is kind of linked them. So you've manually chosen Astro to link with Astro in Salesforce. It's a really primitive version for all of this user sync stuff. So there's no real science behind it other than you've picked one user here, mapped it to this user here. Very, very manual process. So SSO, you'll probably find it hard to find in any accounts, but these bottom two you will. And obviously understanding which one of these a client is using dictates how you need to get us set up. And I'm going to give you a resource at the very end of this video to actually sort of help you get set up. So let's spend a bit more time on user sync. So I found an account that have user sync turned on, but they don't have managed users in Salesforce. So I'm going to show you user sync first, and it looks like this. So you have to go to normal Pardot. So by that I mean pi.pardot.com, or the Lightning app if you've got access. But in this instance, we've got an identity license, so we don't have access to Salesforce. So I come here, I go to admin, I go to connectors, I edit the Salesforce connector. And once I'm in the Salesforce connector, I can then scroll down to a section which is called user sync. Now, you'll immediately know if they're using user sync only versus manage users in Salesforce for two reasons. The first one is there will be a button that says get started for manage users in Salesforce, which means it's not enabled. But then also there's these options here with checkboxes. Now, manage users in Salesforce doesn't have this option because it's all very automatic, and I'll run through how that looks in a second. But the gist of this is whatever your Salesforce profile is, identity user, for example, which is this one here, we're basically saying anyone in Salesforce that has an identity user profile maps to an admin role in this account. That's it. So if my profile changes to a minimum access user, it means I'm downgraded to sales within Pardot. It's all automatic. This changes, maps to this, and it changes accordingly. So with this type of setup, it's important to note that if you've got 1,000 users in Salesforce and all of these are ticked, then all 1,000 will sync across into Pardot. There's no real control over saying, actually, I want this person, this person, this person, this person. It will just map them all. Whereas if I start to take these off, all of these profiles have all of a sudden lost their access to Pardot. So this is user sync. This is how you manage who needs to have access to the system. Now, what happens, for example, if you've got a Panacea Limited user, there's 10 of them, but you only really want 2 of them in here, but 8 of them outside of it. You can't achieve that without changing their profile. That's with user sync. And this is why they've made this smarter, and they've upgraded this to manage users in Salesforce. So if you were to then hit get started, you opt in to manage users in Salesforce, it becomes a little bit smarter again. So I'm going to show you our account now, because we have managed users in Salesforce turned on. And you're going to notice that the user sync checkboxes have gone. And the reason for that, and And obviously we're using the Lightning app, so it looks slightly different. All of the checkboxes have gone. Now, the reason for that is because we've got more control over who needs to be in Pardot. Slightly different perspective on it. So in this instance, we map every single profile. We don't have an option to choose which ones, like the checkboxes. We map them all. But then what we do is we'd go to the configuration in Salesforce. And what we're going to do is, as it's called on the feature, we're going to manage our users in Salesforce. So we go to Pardot account setup. And with this feature, it allows us to hit this manage users button, and we're in Salesforce. That's why they called it manage users in Salesforce. And we can choose exactly who needs access to this account. So for example, our process for any clients is set us up as an identity user and then add us to the account. So the first step is to actually get into Salesforce. Okay, we're going to do that via our identity user. Cool, we're set up. What's the next step? Okay, the next step is, well, it depends. If they're using user sync, we just need to make sure that they've hit that checkbox and they've mapped it to an admin profile. Now, on that point, I'm going to go into detail on that in a second, actually. You can create separate profiles for identity users, but I'll show you that in a sec. So if they're using user sync, that needs to be checked as a checkbox, and we need to have admin access. We're automatically going to sync across, so we don't need to worry too much about that. However, if they're using manage users in Salesforce, which all correctly implemented Pardot accounts moving forwards will have, so you should assume they've got that, unless it's an older account. You come here, you edit user assignments, and you choose exactly who needs access to the account. So let's just say if I wanted to take some people out, it doesn't matter what profile they've got, they haven't got access to this account. So it's kind of like, knocking the door to a house. These guys can't come in regardless of their profile, but these guys can, and it will tell them which rooms they're allowed in. So off the back of this, if Chloe's got an identity user admin profile, she'll get admin access because then user sync kicks in. So you kind of, if you've got this one enabled, you choose what account or business unit they're allowed into, and then user sync kicks in, then off you go. So that example of 1,000 people, I could choose 7 of them, and only 7 of them are going to be in Pardot. Cool. So on the point around identity users, what you can do is in Salesforce, if you want a little bit more control over identity users and how they sync into Pardot, it's a really easy and nice way to actually create some new profiles. So what we tend to do, what we tend to recommend, is to copy the normal identity user profile and just create a couple of others. So you've got identity user as a normal profile because other people might already have this profile. So I'd copy them and I'd create one for admin, one for marketing, one for sales, one for sales manager. And then when I go back into Pardot, I can then say, right, identity admin maps to administrator, identity marketing maps to marketing, and so on. And that's the reason why we do it. So hopefully that helps at least a little bit with regards to user access and how it's set up. But if you still get stuck, there's a blog that I wrote specifically for gaining access to systems or to Pardot accounts. So at the moment it's positioned here, but just search how to set up, and then it will appear. How to set up. And then it will appear here. So this blog's quite good. I've basically just gone through the different scenarios and said, look, this is how to set us up. If you use Salesforce SSO, which is the blue spanner one, do this, this, and this. If you use user sync, do this. If it's manage users in Salesforce, do this. So follow the blog. It's really helpful. And hopefully this training helps.